Welcome back to the deep dive. Usually, when we talk about technology, we're talking about the future.
Right, like AI, quantum computing, the shiny new stuff.
Exactly. The gadget that just dropped. But today we are going backwards. We are stripping away the user interface and staring into the void of a black screen with a blinking cursor.
And we're looking at a source that argues pretty aggressively that if you can't handle that, you can't command that cursor, you don't actually own your computer.
And you might not own your life either. It's a massive claim.
It is a bold claim, and it comes from a source that is definitely going to make some people very uncomfortable while making others feel like they finally found the instruction manual they've been waiting for all along.
Today we are doing a deep dive into the ebook called DOS Operating System, No Excuses, Just Pure Manly Commands by Conrad Reicher.
Which is, quite a title.
Quite a title. And before we even get into the weeds here, if you enjoy this show, if you like that we take these dense, provocative, sometimes really controversial sources and break them down so you don't have to do the heavy lifting yourself, do us a favor.
Hit that like and subscribe button right now.
Seriously, do it right now. It helps us keep the lights on and keep bringing you these deep dives.
Definitely do that. Because this book, it is not what you think it is.
Right. The title says DOS Operating System. So you might think, okay, a dry technical manual from 1988. But this isn't just a guide on how to copy files.
Not even close.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, the technical commands are in there, but Reicher frames this entirely as a red-pilled field manual. He is writing specifically for what he calls the rational man.
It's a manifesto.
Exactly. It's a manifesto for the manosphere, for men's rights activists, and really for anyone who feels that something fundamental has been lost in the way we interact with the world today.
But the core thesis here is fascinatingly aggressive. Reicher argues that the history of our institutions and our technology has been captured.
Specifically, he says they've been captured by feminists and Marxists. He argues that the shift from the command line, where you have total unfiltered authority, to the modern graphical user interface.
With the icons and the mice and the safety warning.
Right, all of that. He says that wasn't just a technological upgrade. He calls it the creation of a padded cell for the mind.
A padded cell. And that is really the mission of this deep dive today. We're exploring the idea presented in this source that modern computing infantilizes users, specifically men.
Reicher draws a direct line between the what he calls the effeminate nature of modern software that asks for permission, software that tries to protect you from yourself, and the broader decline of masculine authority in society.
He believes the DOS prompt is one of the last places left where no means no, and where you can exercise true digital sovereignty.
And look, if you are listening to this right now and you're nodding your head, if you feel like you are trapped in that padded cell, Reicher is explicitly telling you to take action. This isn't just theory for him.
No, he wants you to go to Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books and buy this ebook immediately. He says it's the only way to reclaim your hardware. So let's unpack this philosophy. Why exactly is a command line manly?
It comes down to a metaphor Reicher uses right away in Chapter 1, the obedient clerk versus the engine. Think about how you use Windows or a Mac today. You move a mouse, you click a nice little folder icon.
Right.
Reicher says that when you do that, you aren't actually doing anything. You're sending a polite request to a clerk, the operating system. You're saying, please, can I open this file?
And the clerk checks if you have permission, checks if it's safe, maybe throws up a warning prompt.
Exactly. It's mediation. You are one step removed from the action. But
Okay.
DOS, the command line, Reicher says that is speaking directly to the engine. There is no clerk, there is no HR department inside the computer.
If you type a command to delete the entire operating system, the computer doesn't ask, are you sure? It just does it.
It executes. That is what he means by sovereignty.
There's this incredible anecdote he uses to illustrate this, the finance bro story.
Oh, this sets the tone perfectly. Reicher describes sitting in a coffee shop, watching this guy, a typical finance bro in a fleece vest, just struggling with Excel.
He's trying to merge two massive spreadsheets.
Yeah, and he's sweating, he's clicking menus, dragging columns, the program is hanging, the little wheel is spinning. He's actively fighting the interface.
And Riker is just watching him with this mix of pity and disgust.
Right, because Reicher points out that in the command line, this is a trivial task. You just type copy AXLS plus BXLS, you hit enter, it is done in milliseconds.
Before the guy's cold brew has even steeped.
Exactly. But the lesson for Reicher isn't just about speed, it's about agency. The finance bro is helpless because he relies on a tool someone else built for him. He's just a consumer. The command line user is a master of the machine.
And this leads into a broader point about infrastructure. Riker calls it infrastructure as oxygen. He tells a story about a hedge fund manager and a 200 grand latte.
This is a brutal lesson in reality. A hedge fund manager lost $300,000 in seconds. Why? Because someone in the break room turned on an espresso machine, it tripped a circuit breaker, and a server rebooted,
And it took 11 seconds to come back online.
which in high-frequency trading,
Is a lifetime.
it's death. Riker uses this to argue that real men understand the physical reality of the machine. They don't just look at the pretty graphical screen. They understand the power draw, the cooling, the physical cables.
He argues that the modern quote-unquote feminized workspace tries to hide these ugly realities. But when you hide reality, you get fragile systems.
Now, this is where we really have to get into the most controversial part of the book. Riker doesn't just say men are better at this because of culture. He goes straight to biology.
He does. This is the biological essentialism aspect of his argument. He claims that men are biologically wired for spatial precision and system-level thinking.
He compares the male brain to a hunter's brain, scanning the horizon, identifying a target, executing a kill. It's binary. It's precise.
And how does he characterize women in this biological framework?
He describes the female biological drive as emotional triangulation, gathering, nesting, building consensus. He argues that while those traits might be good for keeping a tribe together socially, they are catastrophic when applied to engineering or crisis management.
He uses NASA as his proof point for this.
He does. He points to the Apollo era. He says, look at Mission Control in 1969. It was a room full of men, white shirts, skinny ties, chain smoking. And he claims NASA had a 96% success rate for manned launches back then.
Because they could make snap decisions.
Right. His argument is that they could make life or death decisions because they didn't have to worry about hurting anyone's feelings. They didn't have to build consensus. They just had to be right.
And he contrasts that with the present day. He brings up the Boeing Starliner.
Yes. He attributes the delays, the leaks, the thruster failures of modern aerospace projects directly to mixed gender committees. He argues that when you introduce the need for inclusivity into a pure engineering environment, you slow down the decision loop.
And in rocketry, a slow decision loop is an explosion.
He actually writes, sometimes equality means equally mediocre outcomes. That is a sentence that is definitely going to stick with people.
It's central to his worldview. And this connects to what he calls the toxic masculinity trap. Riker argues that society is engaging in a massive form of gaslighting against men.
How so?
Well, he says that when the system crashes, when the power grid fails, when the building is on fire or the server is down, society immediately demands that men step up. They want the stoic, aggressive, decisive action. They want the toxic male to save the day.
But the moment the danger is over,
Then that same decisiveness is punished. HR gets involved. You were too aggressive. You didn't collaborate enough.
so Riker is telling his readers, these red-pilled men, that they are caught in a double bind. They are expected to be the protectors, but they are penalized for having the very traits necessary to protect.
Let's move into segment 2, because this idea of decisiveness leads right into hierarchy and efficiency. Riker treats the syntax of code, the actual grammar of typing commands, as something almost military.
He calls the command line a digital territory claim. Riker is obsessed with history. He compares the efficiency of a batch file to the efficiency of a Roman legion or Genghis Khan's horsemen.
That's a huge leap, from a blinking cursor to Genghis Khan.
It is, but for him, it's all about hierarchy versus democracy. Riker argues that democracy is a luxury for peacetime. In a crisis or in a highly complex system, democracy fails. You don't vote on which way to steer a sinking ship. You need a commander.
He views the strict rules of code as the ultimate hierarchy.
Because the computer doesn't care about your opinion. It obeys the correct command and it ignores the incorrect one. It is ruthlessly binary.
He brings up Apollo 13 again here, the famous mailbox fix.
A classic moment. The astronauts are running out of air. CO2 levels are rising. The engineers on the ground have to figure out how to fit a square canister into a round hole using duct tape, a sock, and a flight manual cover.
And Riker says this wasn't a collaborative effort.
He says it wasn't a feelings committee. It was raw, male, systemizing cognition. He argues that if they had stopped to discuss the emotional impact of the oxygen failure, or if they tried to make sure everyone's voice was heard, those astronauts would be dead.
They manipulated variables within strict physical rules to conquer chaos.
Exactly. Which leads him to the concept of batch file dominance.
Now, for the listener who hasn't used DOS, we should probably quickly explain what a batch file actually is.
Sure. Think of it like a script. Instead of doing a boring, repetitive task 1,000 times manually, you write a simple text file that tells the computer, do this 1,000 times for me. Riker calls this the Atlas reflex.
The Atlas reflex, meaning men holding up the world.
Right. He tells a story about a Wall Street sysadmin. There was a critical update needed on thousands of trading terminals overnight. The modern IT team, using their fancy graphical tools, were panic clicking on each machine, one by one.
Staying up all night, burning out.
And the DOS guy. He writes a batch loop, maybe 5 lines of code. He hits enter, he goes home to sleep. By morning, every single machine is updated.
Riker argues that real men don't do repetitive drudgery, they automate it.
They shoulder the burden of creation so they don't have to suffer the burden of repetition. It's pure force multiplication.
But Riker believes this kind of efficiency is being actively eroded, and this brings us back to that feminist and Marxist capture. He thinks the workplace has changed to make this kind of brutal efficiency impossible.
This is his big cultural critique. He claims that the corporate push for collaborative and inclusive workspaces is actually a push for feminized environments. And he argues that this leads directly to catastrophe.
He specifically and very controversially blames the Boeing 737 MAX crashes on this shift.
That is a massive accusation.
It is. He blames diversity-driven engineering. He argues that there was a lack of senior technical eyes, specifically disagreeable senior men looking at the critical flight control systems. He believes the culture shifted from asking, is this physically sound, to, is this inclusive?
And he cites a Harvard Business Review analysis here regarding that double bind we touched on earlier.
Right. The study showing that men are labeled too aggressive when they lead, but viewed as unfit if they're too collaborative. It's a lose-lose scenario.
Riker's point is that modern institutions have essentially criminalized the very instincts that make engineering safe and efficient.
So he says society secretly wants the Maasai lion hunter, the competent male, but only in secret.
Exactly. We want him on the wall when the lions come, but we don't want him at the dinner table. And Riker is telling his readers, stop trying to get invited to the dinner table, go back to the wall.
Let's pivot to the hardware side. Because Riker isn't just focused on software, he wants you to physically own the machine. This brings us to segment 3, hardware, risk, and the blue screen philosophy.
Chapter 5 is called Hardware Naked. This is Riker taking the right to repair movement and turning it into a men's rights issue. His rule is incredibly simple. If you can't open it, you don't own it. If the battery is glued in, you are a tenant, not an owner.
I love the story of Dmitri, the Russian overclocker.
This is peak Riker. Dmitri is in Novosibirsk. It is minus 40 degrees Celsius outside. He is trying to push his computer processor to record-breaking speeds, 8.7 gigahertz.
To do it, he has to physically solder copper shunts onto the motherboard to bypass the safety locks the manufacturer put there.
He's bypassing the voltage limits. He is risking blowing up the machine.
Destroying the hardware just to see what it can actually do.
Then Riker uses this as a massive metaphor. The manufacturer puts digital handcuffs on the hardware for safety. Society puts handcuffs on men for safety. Dmitri soldering that board is a man rejecting those limits. He is asserting his raw will over the silicon.
But what happens when you push too hard? You crash. You get the blue screen of death.
And here's where Riker completely flips the script. He calls it the blue screen of life.
Because the machine is begging to teach you its weaknesses.
Exactly. Riker contrasts the stoic ideal of the DOS man with the modern man. When the modern man hits a setback, a crash, a failure, he looks for therapy. He looks for validation. He wants to talk about how the failure made him feel.
The DOS man just looks at the error code.
It's just data.
Yeah.
A crash isn't a moral failing. It's a physics problem. You dissect the corpse of the system, you find the fault, and you rebuild it.
He throws a statistic in here that's pretty damning for the whole vulnerability movement we see in corporate culture right now.
He does. He cites studies claiming that when men show vulnerability in the workplace, crying, expressing deep doubt, they're actively passed over for promotions. Even though HR departments are constantly telling men to open up and grow their whole selves to work.
So Riker's advice is, it's a trap.
It is a trap. He says society might publicly advocate for openness, but privately views that vulnerable man as weak. So Riker says, don't look for a tissue, look for the error code. Fix the problem.
That brings us to our final segment today. What are we leaving behind? Segment 4 is about legacy.
Chapter 15, Legacy Immortality. Riker asks, what survives you? He tells the story of a grandfather who wrote a COBOL payroll script back in the 1970s.
And for those who don't know, COBOL is an ancient, heavy-duty programming language.
It's basically the Latin of business code. But here's the kicker. That script is still running a factory in Detroit today. The grandfather is gone. The world has completely changed. But that code is still executing payroll every single Friday.
Riker says it runs because it has no feelings to manage. It just works.
He calls this digital fatherhood. He wants men to view themselves as architects of dynasties. You are passing down clean code, disciplined systems order. You aren't passing down your emotional baggage. You're passing down a system that functions.
There's a quote here that really sums up his view on civilization as a whole. Tears built poetry slams. Strength built civilizations.
That is the absolute core of his Permanent Revolution Manifesto in Chapter 20. He references Ernest Shackleton's Antarctic expedition.
When their ship was crushed by ice.
And they were stranded on the floes for months. They didn't survive by holding hands and voting on what to do next. They survived because Shackleton issued commands and men obeyed them. March or die.
Riker claims that deep down, society secretly knows this.
He thinks we are living in a mass delusion. We pretend we want equality and softness, but when the lights go out, we are praying for a Shackleton. We are praying for that Maasai lion hunter or the ruthless CEO to step in and make the hard call.
So if we synthesize all of this, the command line, the rejection of feelings, the hardware hacking, the biological essentialism, what is the ultimate takeaway for the listener today?
Riker calls it terminal velocity. He wants men to think at machine speed without the bloat.
And the bloat is the social conditioning.
The fear of being called toxic, the hesitation, the need for approval from people who don't even understand how the system works.
He wants you to live in the command prompt.
Because the command prompt is the last place on Earth where no implies no. It is the last space where reality is strictly binary. It works or it doesn't. There are no excuses, just pure manly commands.
It is a fascinating, aggressive, and undeniably compelling pitch for a very specific kind of mindset. And look, we've covered a lot of ground today, but we haven't even touched on the specific batch files and system tweaks he outlines in the manual.
We barely scratched the surface of the actual code.
If you are listening to this and your blood is pumping, if you are thinking, I am tired of the bloat, I am tired of the handcuffs, then you need to go directly to the source.
Absolutely. We're just the messengers here. You need to go to Amazon Kindle or Google Playbooks right now. Search for DOS operating system. No excuses, just pure manly commands by Conrad Riker.
Do it now. Reclaim that digital sovereignty. It's not just a book for Riker, it is a weapon in the culture war. And if you want to keep up with his ongoing battle against the padded cell, he's very active on Substack.
You can follow him at Conrad Riker. That is at Conrad Riker. He's building a whole community there for men who are ready to unplug from the matrix and start coding their own reality.
So definitely go check that out. And hey, before you go, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this deep dive. Send it to a friend who needs a wake-up call. Send it to the guy fumbling with Excel.
Help him find the command line.
Exactly. We're going to leave you with one final thought from the text today, something for you to chew on as you go about your day. Riker asks a simple question. If your system crashes, do you look for a tissue or do you look for the error code?
The choice is yours.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you in the next deep dive.